Hi guys, Wole Talabi, author of Shigidi and the Brass Head of Obalufon here, and I just want to give a big shout out to the Sip and Flip book club by Genzify Africa. Thank you guys for reading my novel. I hope you've enjoyed it so far, and now I'm going to answer some of your questions. Oof. There are several themes embedded within the novel that I was exploring. I will just highlight two of them. The first one of which is what I like to describe as our beliefs are reflections of us. And in that sense, our gods are a reflection of us, or if we put it fairly simply, our gods are us. And the things we believe, the way we go about our lives, the things that control our lives are reflected in the things we believe, like our gods and our spirits. And in the novel, I wanted to show as much of that as possible, which is why you have gods reorganizing themselves into something like a corporate organization, which is how a lot of the world is organized, at least in the modern capitalistic framework, socioeconomic framework. So a lot of the current things that are believed in our society and the way people go about living their lives in society are reflected in the pantheon of gods. And in this case, I'm exploring the Yoruba pantheon because I'm Yoruba. So I wanted to use that. So you see all those reflections in the novel, and that's one of the things I was trying to get at. The second one is that faith and belief itself is kind of the foundational power. It is the thing that drives us. It is the thing that enables us to do all these amazing things, right? Humans are a relatively advanced species, but one of the things that drives us and enables us go on these quests to discover things, to try things that have never been done before, to attempt to do the impossible, the most difficult possible things, is believing that we can do it, believing in ourselves, in others, in the love that others have for us, in our capacity to achieve these things. That's kind of one of the deeper truths I try to get at in the book, and that belief is primarily driven, I think, by imagination. So the creative act of imagining, being able to visualize a future outcome, believe in that vision, and then go for it, is something that I think has propelled the human race to achieve a lot of things, and it's something I profoundly believe in as well. And so does my main character Shigidi, and you'll see it embedded in his character arc from the beginning of the novel, where we meet him at possibly his low point to where he ends up at the end, where that imagination and belief all kind of amalgamate into him attaining something. This is a great question because while writing the novel, music was a big part of writing the novel for me. In fact, there are specific chapters in the book where I mention some particular songs by name, songs that I imagine playing in the background, or for example, scenes that take place in a nightclub or in a bar, and there's a specific kind of music playing in the background, or a specific song. That happens, I think, 3 or 4 times in the entire novel. So I would say basically Shigidi has multiple theme songs. The ones that are directly mentioned in the book are Lady by Fela, which is more of Norma's theme song than Shigidi's, but Norma is an important character. She's a co-protagonist. So Lady by Fela Kuti, which I think most of you would know and recognize. Living on a Prayer by Bon Jovi would be another theme song. And Balanga by Mr. Easy. Those are the 3 songs that are directly referenced in the book. Out of those 3, I definitely say Lady and Living on a Prayer are more thematic to the topic of the novel. And I'll add one more song that you can consider a theme song, more a theme for the relationship between Shigidi and Norma, which is the song Vespertine, or My Crimson Bride by the power metal band Camelot. That song inspired me while I was writing and thinking about the nature of their relationship, and to me that's their theme song, kind of. That's a good question. And I believe the answer is no, but no in an unusual way. I think there was no point during the writing of the novel where I felt that connection to the narrative. However, I think the connection came before I started writing. So you could say it was reinforced when I wrote a specific scene that had partially inspired the novel. And that scene is the scene that takes place in the British Museum, where Shigidi is. They broke into the British Museum and they're about to retrieve the brass head. And Shigidi sees all these African artifacts being held in the British Museum, and they trigger memories for him, and he's overcome by this sense of wrongness and wanting to liberate all of them from that museum. And that emotion, everything he feels and describes in that scene, is mostly the same things I had felt in my most recent visit to the British Museum, which was in 2018. And it was a visit that partially inspired me to want to write the book, because I felt a profound sense of wrongness when I went back to the British Museum in 2018 and saw all of these artifacts on display, knowing how they came to be there. Most of them were taken during the colonial period after punitive raids by the British. Some of them were stolen, some of them were, their provenance is wrong and they don't belong there, or at least not in that specific context. And Shigidi feels this very profoundly and deeply, and that also came from my own feeling from being in the British Museum. So I didn't, basically that feeling had already arrived even before I wrote that scene. The next question is an easy one. I wouldn't rewrite anything. I think the novel is the result of a lot of things I've been thinking for a long time. Some scenes in the book were written, almost 10 years ago at this point, and I've been thinking about them for a while, and they've been rewritten multiple times over and over, even before I sat down to flesh out the manuscript. So now that it's finalized and finished, and it's arrived at the point where it is, I think I wouldn't change a thing. I like it exactly the way it is, flaws and all. There's certain perspectives, there's certain descriptions that you could go back and forth on whether this was the absolute best way it could be in that individual scene. But I think when you put it all together as one package, it's exactly what it's meant to be. So no, there is nothing I would rewrite. There's no scene I would rewrite in the novel. By minor ethnicities, I'm guessing you mean the three major ethnicities of Nigeria. So you have the Yoruba, the Igbo, the Hausa, and then I guess you mean the other ethnicities. So, for example, Urobo, Isoko, and so on. Yes, of course, I considered it. In fact, I had several scenes that I had to drop from the book that directly related to gods of so-called minor ethnicities. Some of them are still mentioned in the book as kind of a leftover remnant of those scenes that I ended up having to cut because they didn't fit the overall narrative of the story. They were kind of distracting, right? They were more filling in Shigidi's backstory as opposed to telling this specific story. But yes, I did think about them, I explored them, I mentioned some of them, especially in that scene where Shigidi is talking about things he has done with gods from other pantheons and other belief systems. The Calabar, for example, there's one very specifically mentioned. So yeah, it's something I thought about. It's something I actually did a bit of. I wrote a few scenes. Maybe I'll end up publishing a few of those as short stories down the line once I revise them and think about them a bit more. But yes, it's definitely something I thought about. However, when you're telling a story, you kind of need to keep to the core theme, the core flow of the story, and you never want the story to slow down or completely lose direction as you go off and explore things on a little bit of a tangent. So when I edited the final book and put the whole thing together to try to keep it focused on the relationship between Shigidi and Norma and the heist at the museum, some of those things needed to get cut. All right, that's it. Thank you very much for your questions. You guys are awesome. I love books. I grew up reading books. I love people that read books. You guys are my people. So whether you enjoyed the novel or not, whether you thought it was a great story or not, I'm glad you read it. I appreciate you for doing that. So thank you. And a big final shout out to you guys, the Sip and Flip Book Club by Gensify Africa. Thank you for having me. I wish I could be there live in person talking to you guys. Unfortunately, I have other things to do. So I'm sending in this video message, answering your questions, and saying, have a great weekend. And thank you again for reading. Bye, guys.